What is lolliable? Lolliable? Lolliable. What can you wear in Lolita fashion? When I first got interested in Lolita fashion and wanted to start wearing it, I was in middle and high school. This was the mid to late 2000s, so internet shopping wasn't as popular. My parents hadn't gotten very familiar with it, and I didn't have access to a lot of money. So I had to get really creative, especially in terms of accessories, like shoes, like blouses, like necklaces and headwear, because I was not able to get a hold of a lot of brand pieces or Lolita specific pieces. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about some of the basics of taking normal or normie items and bringing them into your Lolita fashion. The first thing I want to talk about is to always keep in mind of your sub-style that you've chosen to work on. So if you're a beginner Lolita, usually it's recommended to stick with one main sub-style and branch out as the years go on. It takes a long time to build a Lolita wardrobe, and it takes a lot of time trying to curate your closet. So sticking with one sub-style is much easier. I will say, I think Gothic and classic Lolitas have a little bit easier time incorporating some normie clothes into their fashion. The only reason why I say goth Lolitas is because a little less strict guidelines apply in terms of like collar shape. You can get away with a pointed collar more in Gothic, I feel, than you would be able to in Sweet. So those are some things to keep in mind. I would say if you're a classic Lolita, you might have an easier time finding pieces because a lot of professional wear has aesthetics that are also seen in classic Lolita, but that is not a hard and fast rule, and it can be hard all across the board. So first I want to talk about blouses, because those are things that I feel are really easy to make Loliable, and you can find them in thrift stores. That's primarily where I shop, in fast fashion shops, boutiques, lots of different places. So what is important to look for in a normie blouse for a Lolita coordinate? My number one rule is to avoid pointed collars. Especially if you're a Sweet Lolita. If you're a Gothic Lolita, you could probably get away with it a little more depending on the pieces. I'd say if you are more of like an edgier goth style, definitely you can use those pointed collars, but I'd say if you're more like a romantic or definitely an old school style goth, the pointed collars are probably not going to go with your wardrobe very well. As a rule, if you're new, I would say just to stay away from pointed collars in Lolita with normie items, because you're gonna run into a lot of problems there. So this is an example of a normie blouse that I got, I believe at Kohl's, that works for my wardrobe. I've had it for years. The brand is Lauren Conrad, and in general, I think she makes a lot of stuff that is Loliable. But I like the small Peter Pan rounded collar. It's very high up, so it makes it easy to see under a JSK. Additionally, it's got this bow texture at the top. That's pretty cute, and it shows through. I love to wear this blouse because if I have a necklace that goes about here, it just demonstrates it beautifully. And these type of blouses are something that are really widely available in a lot of fast fashion shops as well as thrift stores. Here is another example of a shirt that could be used for Lolita that looks really nice. So the collar has this bow that droops over a little, which can look really cute. It's got this little ruffle. And that's another thing I want to touch on. When you're looking for blouses out in the world, you'll want to look for details that you would also find in Lolita. Things like ruffles, bows, polka dots, or just small details that would add to a coordinate are things you would want to look for. Here is an example of a blouse that I might see somebody try to use for Lolita, but I personally do not think works for Lolita. Although there are styles like creepy cute Lolita and pastel goth Lolita, stuff like that, bittersweet to some extent, might use the pink with the crosses. That's not the problem I have with this blouse, it's the pointed collar. So some people have the tendency to look at the pattern on a blouse or the color that it is and say, perfect, it goes with my dress, that's perfect for Lolita. But one of the things you really want to look for is the construction of the blouse. This is a very standard, I would almost say masculine looking blouse with the pockets on the front and the non-fitted construction, as well as that pointed collar. So although this would look really beautiful and really cute in normal fashion, for Lolita it doesn't stand up, because if you're wearing dress with a lot of detail, wearing a blouse that doesn't have a lot of detail is not going to help your coordinate at all. In fact, it's going to make it look a little less put together and cohesive. This is another type of item I often see new people trying to incorporate into Lolita, which seems like a good idea, but potentially is hard to pull off. The construction of the shirt in general is just basically a t-shirt. The only difference is that it's made of lace. So this looks really casual in comparison to a lot of Lolita outfits. It could be pulled off, but if you're just learning, it might be a little difficult for it to read as Lolita, and you might do better with one of those Peter Pan blouses. So this is something I've seen a lot of people doing in the community, is putting a cute ruffly shirt or Lolita specific shirt underneath a t-shirt to make it look a little bit more Lolita-esque. I feel like the design on this as well is extremely cute, but putting that blouse underneath, and this is a blouse from Forever 21. It's completely sheer, but it has a little ruffle on the collar as well as the sleeves, so this would be a really cute standard blouse for you to pick up. You can find something like this in many different places, but it is partially a matter of like what's in style. I believe I found this one actually at a thrift store, so that's where I get a lot of my pieces. It's just a matter of searching through. But I really like how it looks with this t-shirt, and if I was to wear another t-shirt, I would probably put something like this underneath it. So let's talk about skirts and dresses. One of the most difficult parts of Lolita is getting the main pieces. Dresses and skirts can be really expensive, especially if you're just starting out in the fashion, you're not fully committed to it as a hobby yet, and you don't have anything to pair it with. It can be intimidating to buy your first dress. However, I would say it is extremely hard to find any sort of pieces out at thrift stores, in retail shops, even in boutiques or vintage shops that have the exact silhouette of Lolita. You can definitely find A-line skirts and T-length A-line skirts, which might be sufficient. However, oftentimes those dresses don't allow room for an actual petticoat underneath. So I personally would give somebody the advice to spend more of your money on the main pieces and use your money to get Loliable items out in the world where you can, versus trying to find a Loliable dress. Oftentimes people use ones from Hot Topic, which can be good if you want to have that Lolita feel without full on, but some of those dresses can still be expensive, and you can find a $50 dress on Taobao that will actually fit a petticoat. Considering that the petticoat is one of the defining characteristics of a Lolita coordinate, it's not really sufficient. Another thing I often see is people using skater dresses for Lolita dresses. And again, it's totally up to you if you want to do that, but don't be surprised if you get a lot of concrete about that, because those dresses aren't constructed like Lolita dresses are. They don't usually have the same aesthetic in terms of, lace or ruffles, and they don't usually allow for room for a petticoat, and they're not the shape to have a petticoat underneath them. Next, let's talk about Lolita shoes. I struggled to find Loliable shoes out in the world when I first started. It was my weakest spot for years, and it continues to be my weakest spot because I get very uncomfortable wearing heels or any sort of shoe that isn't flat. So oftentimes I just stick with whatever feels comfiest and wear that for years. But I do have tips about finding Loliable shoes out in the world. Most of my shoes I get from the thrift store, as I've said before. So let me show you some examples of things that I found at thrift stores that work and that don't work. So a lot of my shoes are beat up because I don't have very many, and this is one of them. They have suede on the side, they have 3 little buttons, and then there's this little vinyl toe situation going on here. And these are a great style of shoe for somebody who is doing like a darker classic look or a gothic look. They really mimic the style of Victorian booties, so any Victorian inspired style is gonna look good with these. In general, I had a harder time finding shoes for Sweet Lolita than gothic and classic, which is why I struggled for so long, because I initially wanted to be a super sugary Sweet Lolita. And it's hard to find pink and white shoes out in the world that look cutesy enough to go with Sweet Lolita. But this is a great example of a pair of shoes that would work for gothic or classic. So one good thing about the fashion is that you can definitely wear just a regular pair of pumps or heels, as long as they're not pointy-toed, as long as they've got a rounded toe. Those are going to be a safe bet, especially because you'll be able to find those in a variety of colors. Shoes like this, however, strappy heels, are not going to be sufficient for a Lolita coordinate because they are intended to be worn without socks and they show more skin. So a pair of shoes like this is definitely not something I would recommend ever in Lolita. I think it looks really mix-mashed, and shoes that are intended to be sandals, in my opinion, always look weird with socks. So this is something I would suggest to stay away from. So this is a pair of shoes that you could probably find in a regular store, just out in the world. It's got these buckles and 3 straps, rounded toes, and then a blocky heel, which is always good for Lolita if you don't want to wear like stilettos. Those aren't really seen anyway. But there are lots of shoes that look kind of similar to this in many different colors and styles. Maybe they don't have the straps, maybe they do, but looking for a pair of shoes like this is going to be a really good bet for you if you don't have a lot of other options. For Sweet Lolitas, you can look for shoes like this in gold, is a really common color in Lolita that I see gold shoes out in the world at Ross all the time. When you're looking for a shoe for Lolita out in the world, my best advice is to look for something that's extremely simple that you can use with a lot of different outfits until you can maybe purchase some Lolita specific shoes. Now, let's talk about jewelry, and we'll dabble into accessories a little bit. So personally, jewelry, so as is the theme throughout this whole video, Sweet is kind of in its own category, and classic and gothic are in a category together in terms of the type of jewelry you're going to be wearing for each fashion. For gothic and classic, you can go for antique pieces, things that are really ornate, things you can find in vintage shops, brooches, stuff like that. And you're gonna wanna stray a little bit further away from novelty items. For goth, you definitely can wear something like a spider necklace, but it does depend on the aesthetic you're going for. For example, I wouldn't wear a spider or bat-shaped necklace with a coordinate like this because it has more elements of old school or romantic goth fashion that would require a little bit more ornate type of jewelry, maybe including beading or something that's a little more reminiscent of a rosary rather than like a big chunky bat necklace. It probably isn't going to mesh well with the style. However, with a pastel goth or creepy cute outfit, it might be able to be pulled off more because those styles have more novelty items. Sweet can get away with a lot more novelty items, however they are a little bit harder to find, especially because even if you're dressing in Sweet Lolita, you do not want your coordinates to look like they were picked out of the kids section at Claire's, even if some of your stuff is coming from there. Another common thing I see a lot of newer Lolitas doing is using cheerleading-esque bows or really big gross grain construction bows in their hair, which tend to be a little bit smaller and don't go across the head. And those I don't feel work super well for Lolita. You could always pick up some nicer, higher quality ribbon with potentially lace or more detail and make one of those that looks really similar yourself easily. And ones that are made for cheerleading usually come in colors that you wouldn't typically find in Lolita anyway. So it just cheapens the overall look. Not that there's anything wrong with those, just that Lolita is a really ornate, elegant fashion. So using items that are used in a casual sense, like a cheerleader, really isn't going to mesh well with it. So we've talked about accessories you could maybe find at Claire's, and there are some great accessories you can find at Claire's. However, you'll want to go with things that look slightly more mature, put together, or simple. So I have a couple examples of good Claire's accessories and then one example of a not so good one for Lolita that is still cute, although old. So I'll first show you this one, which is a headband I found at Claire's that works beautifully for the kind of bittersweet style I do, as well as gothic. It's basically got this lace. You'll see it has like a very vintage feel to it. It doesn't look like it was made for a kid. It's got little pearl detail here, and it's just a little bit nicer of a piece. I think it only costs like $8. This thing kills my head is the only issue. But this is like a great example of an appropriate Lolita accessory from Claire's. Another great thing if you're a sweet Lolita is to just get these little bows from Claire's. They come in all sorts of different colors and different sizes. I have this one in black, but they have ones in pink, and sometimes they're a little bit bigger. Sometimes they come in kind of a more silky fabric. And these are great accessories, especially if you're going for an OTT look. You could just pin it in or pin it anywhere. These are great standard items to have in different colors. And Claire's has a lot of them, and they don't really look like they're necessarily made just for kids. Here's an example of a headband that is not suitable for Lolita, but might trip some people up because it is a bow. And some people think that if it's got a bow, it's Lolita. This headband's super cute. I've worn it a million times, so it's really old, but it is from Claire's, and I wouldn't use this for Lolita because the bow isn't big enough. It's not very ornate. It kind of looks more vintage inspired rather than Lolita specifically. It might be cute with a very casual coordinate, but it looks more casual just in general. And even casual Lolita is not a completely casual fashion, which is kind of the main point I'm trying to drive home here. You want to look for items that are a little bit nicer quality, or things that look a little bit more dressed up rather than just, you know, a headband you could wear with just a basic sundress and call it good. Still super cute, but not Lolita. So let's talk about hats, which is one of my favorite Lolita accessories. I think that hats are a really great way to start building up your wardrobe and feeling like you have a lot of different accessories and you maybe don't, or you can't find like a bow or a headdress that's super suitable. A hat is a great option. There are good and bad hats though, so we'll go over that now. I would say a middle ground that I wouldn't recommend for beginners is the slouchy beanie. This can definitely look Lolita if paired correctly. Usually the way I coordinate something like this is I have a bow at the brim of it. I do that with berets too. But for a slouchy beanie, it's especially important. And sometimes it can almost even look like it's a beret. But in general, I would caution you away from this because it also still has that extremely casual feel to it that's not going to look super polished with a regular Lolita coordinate. Here is an example of a hat that I found at a craft market, I believe. And this is a great example of a hat that works perfectly in Lolita because it's got a little bit nicer quality construction and it looks a little bit more polished than the average hat. Hats I would avoid that almost seem like a good idea but are not are flapper type bucket hats. Unless you're going for a really vintage flapper girl inspired Lolita coordinate, I would not use one of those hats because it just doesn't connect right. Lolita's slightly historically inspired, but it's not all the way there, so Some old-fashioned pieces look good, but I would stay away from those flapper bucket hats unless you really want to go for that type of look. Another one, it might seem obvious to some, but fedoras just don't really go with Lolita. Fedoras traditionally are worn with a suit, and so wearing it with the big puffy dress looks just kind of off. Again, these are all my personal opinions, so if you love that look, you do you. But if you want it to read as Lolita, don't wear a fedora. Here is an example of a beret you can find. And these are really easy to find during winter time. You can find them at thrift stores, you can find them at retail stores. Really, it's easy to find berets, so that's why they're great for beginners. Let's move on to bags. So I don't always have my bag match my coordinate. I'm weak in that area. However, it's always good to keep in mind if your bag matches your outfit, it's fun. Here's an example of a bag I probably wouldn't use in a Lolita coordinate. It's got more of a professional look. It's got more of a corporate look. It's very boxy, and it doesn't really go with a Lolita coordinate. Some might not think this goes, but I do. I think depending on the coordinate, it definitely does. One of my favorite bag designers is Betsy Johnson, and I think that her bags are actually really great, especially for Sweet Lolita, because she's got a lot of novelty items and things that could go. I've seen she's had bags that are cakes. She's had bags that are like bottles of water or like little bats and pumpkins and stuff like that. And those kind of bags are great in Lolita. You can find them at Ross for really affordable prices if you're in the US, or TJ or TK Maxx and Marshalls, those like retail stores, Burlington. You can find them in places like that, and so it's really nice because you can have some of those novelty bags that you would find in places like AP and Baby. This one is my telephone bag. Obviously I wear bittersweet, so like the black stuff, I think it goes with it. Not everybody does, but I'm also very tacky, so I just love stuff like this. Betsy also just has bags that have bows on them. That's always a good look. Bags that are just a little bit cutesier for like Sweet Lolita. For gothic and classic, that would definitely depend on your outfits, of course, but bags that have cute little lace detailing or that are a little bit more statement pieces tend to look good. I would always try to keep the bag with the theme of the outfit. Like I was saying earlier with the novelty jewelry items, if you're wearing a romantic gothic outfit, don't go for a giant bat bag because it's just gonna look a little weird. You'd wanna go for maybe something that is a little bit more upscale or looks classier. Or you could just be like me and wear whatever bag you want and don't take a picture of it, but some people don't like that. And finally, we are getting to legwear. So legwear is probably one of the easier things to find, especially if you aren't looking for something super elaborate right away and you're getting into the fashion. One of my favorite things is tights. So tights are great for Lolita because they can really polish an outfit. They're pretty inexpensive to get and you can find them in a lot of colors. So this is a pair of purple tights that have like a lacy, like floral pattern, which is great for Lolita because it really gives like a little bit more texture to an outfit and it looks really pretty to have like the lacy tights. I found these at Target. And Target has a lot of different kinds of tight selections like that. If you were really strapped for cash, they have them in black, they have them in white, sometimes they have gray. This is another pair I found that is like a burgundy color. And these are pretty much opaque, but they do have like a slight floral pattern to them, so they look really nice. In terms of socks, you might have a harder time finding things, at least I do. A lot of socks tend to be extremely plain, which is fine, but I kind of like my legwear to have some sort of pattern. And I noticed that that's really common in a lot of Lolita outfits. You're really, you know, over the top and cute everywhere else, so you want to be on the bottom as well. But the things you'll probably be able to find more common than not are striped socks like this. You can find those in places like Hot Topic. Sometimes you'll find ones in different colors as well, like white and pink or orange and black if you were like going for like a more Halloween type look. But as far as like socks that look kind of more like AP or baby or moitié, it's gonna be a little harder to find those patterned socks out in the world. So I would just stick with tights until you can afford to buy a little bit nicer socks on Bodyline or something like that, or even brand socks too. So we went through a lot of items that could be lollyable or could not be lollyable. Hopefully you learned something from this video. And in conclusion, I'll just say, any sort of clothing item that is meant to be sexy or risque probably shouldn't be used in Lolita. It doesn't tend to go with a lot of the aesthetics unless you're going for a very particular look, so I would stay away from those usually. Thank you everyone who watched, and if you would like to see more videos like this about what can be lollyable, I would really love to go into a thrift store and kind of look through some stuff and give commentary about that. So if you want to see that, let me know. Let us know if you have any ideas for other videos we could do down in the comments below. You can also follow us on social media. We do a lot of things. Our next virtual event will be coming up in September 2021, and that will be Virtual Versailles. We're gonna have a lot of super awesome stuff for that. You can follow us on Instagram at roseforetco, like Colorado, C-O. Or you could go like us on Facebook. We're just Rose Foret, same way it's spelled here. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have an amazing day. Bye.